will forget. I know we have a few folks supposed to come. We're pretty early here. Relatively. Hey, Victor.
Hey, John. How are you?
Good. How are you? Put in the agenda and the notes, I guess. Hey, Michael, Oliver, nice to see you guys.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. Good. We'll give it another minute or two. Let people join.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Thomas. One more minute. I'm kind of looking for Abby because I think she's going to lead this part. No, she's on her way. Yeah, do we want to, has anyone here does anyone here want to introduce themselves? Have you not had a chance to introduce yourself to this group? If you do, just tell us, what your role is, I guess, and, what your strengths and interests are so we can keep you in mind. Marsh, yeah.
I'll go. Hi. I somehow wandered into this by accident, and it intersects with my interests. So I'm a product manager. I've been working on Apogee for an embarrassingly long time. Now it's part of Google, and my interests come around how does API management intersect with platform engineering? It used to be how it intersected with DevOps, but these things go together, and so I'm excited about what I've seen in the working group paper, and it caught my attention enough to start adding comments and want to join a call. So it's good to be here.
Very cool. Yeah, actually, in the broader tag recently, API stuff has been coming up a lot. Not necessarily gateways, but like Microx came through recently, and we were talking with them and some other standards around APIs. We've even been discussing, but I also don't think this will be API management, like second level APIs, like cross planes APIs on Kubernetes, and graphics promises when Abby's here. But does that relate?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's some things that we share in common, right? APIs, have this urgency around being treated like a product because they're in the service of others, and the platform is in the same way in the service of others. And so, how do you enable that? And the whole point is to power up everyone else. And so these things go together. They also intersect because you can't separate the API from the service. And that cuts both ways, right? If you tend to, I don't know what service-oriented architecture, I would argue, focus too much on the services side, and API management is the space to think about APIs more as products. That's how I would define the difference. And so, Sorry, did someone say something?
Yeah, me. Is that because
Oh, yeah.
it's the interface?
Is that, right, that at some point, some software somewhere has to fulfill a request. And so you can't get away from the fact that there's an implementation somewhere that's making the magic happen. But from the consumer perspective, you don't need to know how it works. You just need to know how to invoke it. I mean, to me, APIs are like magic in that way, in that as long as you know how to invoke it, things happen. That's
Yeah.
kind of amazing.
I do have one other, synergy for you, which I'm looking for opportunities to pursue both that API category and the other one is the portals category, where one of
Yeah.
the abilities I think which is really prominent in Backstage is the software catalog, which is also a pretty big feature of a lot of the API management projects. So
Yeah, that's I'm concerned that we've blurred these things together too much in some ways, and it's
if you
tough.
want
I mean,
to do
again,
something like portals and how we're doing like software catalogs
yeah,
and things.
yeah, because to me, I think there's sort of two things. One is like the service registry. How do you understand the implementation view of the world? And then there's the more consumer-oriented view. How do you know what capabilities exist in an organization, and how do you gain access to them? And to me, unfortunately, there's this collision because we didn't think so far enough ahead in the early API management days we call them developer portals, right? Because they're the audiences for developers, and the thing that's being offered or vended is an API. And there's even a kind of like checkout process. How do you get credentials? How do you manage those things? And so I think of those really as API storefronts now, less as a developer portal, because things like Backstage have emerged to fill the space that is really a much broader view of what developers need. Like it's what do you need to be successful as a software engineer in a company? That's what Backstage is handling. And it may be a good place to also include an API storefront, but not necessarily. And if you confuse those things too much, I think you run into some dangerous waters. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's my interest, how it intersects with platform engineering. I'm really curious to see how we tell the story of these sort of different modes of kind of the same thing at sometimes.
Cool. Well, good to have you here. I was just thinking today we haven't had some of the Backstage folks for a little while, and good to make sure that the project folks are involved. CNCF project.
But by the way,
right,
if anyone else is interested in talking about these things and outside of this forum, like just to like explore the space, I'm sure there's a bunch I haven't thought about on the platform engineering side that I would love to know more about. But I can definitely offer some API management experience to figure out how those things dovetail.
Cool. Thank you. Abby, how are you?
Hello. I am good. Sorry about that. I was just caught up with some more CNCF stuff. So yes, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, well, that's a good occasion for me to congratulate you. I'm so happy and thank you for joining our leadership for the group.
Yes.
Thank you
Pure servant leadership. If there's anything I do to help anyone, let me know. But I am very excited to be more involved and to stay involved, and there's some really awesome ongoing projects. So very excited to be joining you all and continuing to work on them. So thank you for the support.
So with that, Abby, I want to throw you right in the fire. Will you lead
Wouldn't have
us
it any
in
other way.
going over the maturity model?
Wouldn't have it any other way. Perfect. Yes. So sorry I missed the first few minutes, so if any of this feels very out of touch with whatever you're talking about, give a shout. But there's an ongoing project around the maturity model. I think I recognize everybody has read it to some degree, of differing degrees and different levels of recency, so I won't go too far into it. But where I think we've zoomed in, I would say last week, this week, and I would suspect maybe for another week or so, is if we can get the kind of one-shot table, the very concise summary of what are the levels and what are the aspects that are leveled, a bit more tightened up, a bit more clear, and following our intentions, then we can worry about the more detailed explanations afterwards. So there's lots of great comments in the detailed paragraphs, but what you'll see is that as I've been replying to you, I've been often coming back up to the table and leaving the paragraphs as they are. That's why, because I think the paragraphs have to come off the back of the complete model. So it'd be cool to spend a few minutes. I think maybe we're going to spend about 20 minutes here today-ish, but Josh, you can keep me honest on that. Going over the model summary. So this is the table with all the colors in the document, which I think I saw someone share in the Zoom. Yes, thank you, Josh.
I was sharing, but oh yeah. Do you want to share your
I'm
screen?
happy to share my screen as well. Yes. Oops. Let's see. So, this one. Hopefully you can see the maturity model and particularly the summary box of the maturity model here. Try and make it a bit wider, make that a bit easier to read. So I guess I'll a little bit just open the floor. I think that where we're trying to get to is whether or not we've had some conversation around whether or not we want the levels to be numbered or named, etc. And then we've also had some conversations around whether or not we want whether or not these aspects are inclusive enough, like they cover enough ground, whether or not they're worded correctly and so forth. And then obviously the combination of those two decisions help us solidify the progression for those levels that I think we have some questions about. But there's been a lot of change since the last call, which is I think 2 weeks ago. So if you haven't seen the update since it's been looked at recently, please take a minute to read it through and give a shout about something you're passionate about having a conversation, given that we've got all the people in the room today. So many people in the room, I should say, not all, but.
Do we want to maybe go through each aspect and chat about it?
Can do that. Does anyone else have a different angle they'd like to go on? That seems like a sensible one, if not.
I like that one. I think because it's been, about like a week and some, and it's definitely changed quite a bit. So if we can go through it together, I think that'd be helpful.
Cool. Awesome. So we'll keep it then just to like make sure to be concrete. We'll keep it as just talking about levels 1 through 4. We know that there may or may not be something that we can do to help clarify what 1, 2, 3, 4 actually stands for, but we're going to keep it just talking about 1 through 4, and we'll go down the list to look at the aspects. So and walk through those. Awesome. The other thing I guess I'd call out is there's been some really good conversation. So by going through these aspects, what would be really helpful is to identify if they are at similar granularity / similar impact / they feel like they are peers, because they should be peers. And if they aren't, why not? What can we do about that? And then the other thing to keep in mind is whether or not they are a complete list. So are there duplications, like too much overlap between any of them, or is we missing gaps in something we want to talk about when it comes to platform maturity? So if you can keep those things in mind as we go through, that are questions that won't come up for any one aspect, but are important when talking about the maturity model as a whole, just to call that out. So investment is one that we've had a bunch of conversation around. I think it was originally like budget or something along those lines. I know that's one of the other ones we had discussed. And sorry, go on, Josh.
It was funding originally.
Funding,
yeah,
funding originally.
Budget and investment all came.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think the key here, so we've written these sentences to try and clarify why we have it. So how much does the company value and invest in platform engineering efforts? The idea here being that we've seen a differences worth of investments in the sense of, do people view this as a one-off cost? Do they view this as something that's ongoing? Do they view infrastructure as the singular domain of the platform team, or is it actually an offering from internal to the organization? And so by talking about investment, we're talking about what kind of impact the platform engineering group can have on the engineering efforts of the organization. And so it goes from sort of this one-off funding. So this idea of like, sure, you can have a few people or a few bucks to try and get something done, but then we expect you to finish up wipe your hands and move back to the other projects that we have. The next level would be, okay, sure, we understand this is an ongoing thing. We've got this annual budget, but and so that's great. And we have designated platform engineering team, which is good. And but that's going to be a very like technical team at this level with the current definition, versus at level 3, we start to introduce that this is a product team. So there are roles being paid for that are not pure engineering roles. So specifically mentioned here is product manager, but also you could imagine here like an internal evangelist or other roles that would not be builders of the platform. And then finally, there'd be some expectation that the platform team can speak to the profit and loss of the organization as a part of their like funding. So they can gain access to more funding by improving the profit and loss of the business through their efforts. And they will also potentially get squeezed on funding if not. So, and I think the big difference here between 3 and 4 is that in many organizations, people think of something like platform engineering or infrastructure as like a necessary cost that just is, versus this is about making sure that that cost is not just a, oh, well, we have to pay for cloud compute, it's fine, but actually something that people can actually ask hard questions about and make sure are doing business oriented outcome work. So how do people feel about where we've landed with some of those word changes and things? Any questions?
Yeah, personally, I like a lot of these changes. I think it makes sense. It's pretty succinct. I think and I know we're not going to get too specific here, but I think maybe proof of concepts that being mentioned for the first level is maybe a bit too broad. It just maybe want to just be reconsidered of like what exactly is that meaning. And then the 4th level, I think related to the budget and dedicated capabilities. I think 3 and 4 almost kind of seem a little blurred together as well. I know that you explained sort of the differentiation between the two. I'm not sure if there's any way that we can make it more clear. Those are kind of my first thoughts on that.
What else are people thinking? What I really liked, sorry, how you like called attention to the things that you most wanted to challenge or to like think deeper on. I think that's really helpful when we're getting to the nuanced conversations. We can agree on vast majorities of things. Where are the disagreements? So where else would people like to highlight like things to think about for this aspect?
Abby, can you hear me?
Yep.
I hope.
Yep.
It's just a one question from my side. Like for this model of summary, is it oriented around everyone who actually reading the documents, or is it more of focusing around technical aspect of the platform, or is actually the way you actually perceive the platform? So the one is actually more oriented around DevOps, platform engineering, developer relations guy who are actually selling the platform. Another one is actually who is actually more focused, is already have a domain. So what sort of target audience is for? This is for everyone?
So we do have a target audience section up at the top, and it is self-admittedly quite broad, which is sometimes one of those like if everyone owns it, nobody owns it conversations. So I think this should be definitely up for conversation. I would say, if I'm understanding your question correctly, this is definitely focused on the producers of platform capabilities over the consumers of platform capabilities. But in the scope of like, is it based around the budget holders of platform capabilities versus the boots on the ground engineers doing the platform capabilities? I think that's where we've kept quite a broad audience. But this is, I think, naturally going to trend towards higher level roles and job titles, because at certain levels, people want to know what tools to use and what code to write. And this is not what this document does. So I think this is going to trend towards team leadership, director level, and maybe CTO level-y type people at the most.
And the next question, Abby, is like sometime I do see a model like this in the website when people mentioning build versus buy dilemma, and they have something similar to these tables being presented. So do you think like if somebody is actually focusing or is actually looking for information around build versus buy dilemma, so is this is the
in my personal opinion, and this is not in the, I don't think codified yet in the maturity model. I'm not sure it needs to be or should be, but in my personal opinion, it isn't build versus buy. It's what should we build and what should we buy, and you need to do both. And I think that in my opinion, this one is starting to get to that point where it's like just buying something might give you a heck of a lot of benefit, but realistically, you're going to need to curate that in some way. And that curation might be through configuration of something you purchased, which can usually go to a certain extent, or it may be around something else, stitching together purchase solutions. And so I think, yeah, so this is not meant to be a build versus buy option. This is meant to be focused on outcomes and capabilities and benefits that businesses will achieve looking at platform engineering, and they should be able to leverage this document whether they choose to build or buy, or what I believe is going to end up for really most organizations, which is a bit of both, just on a scale of how much they build versus how much they buy. But Marsh, I see you had your hands up, so wanted to make sure I didn't.
Yeah, I just want, I had a couple questions. So one, I mean, I think each of these stages represents sort of the distinguishing traits of that stage, if I understood correctly. And that I find it interesting in the third stage, dedicated platform product manager. I think that may be a prerequisite to getting to stage 4. And then it seems also that emergence of metrics that help quantify the impact that the team is having on the company. Both of those things seem to go together. I'm not actually familiar enough with actual successes in stage 4 to know whether these are valid prerequisites or not. But feel free to reject any of the suggestions or adjust as you like.
No, I think
an outsider's view.
I definitely think you're right. I think so. I'm just trying to capture that. It's required. Is this a prerequisite for getting to stage 4, as it is progressing to stage 4 requires someone to keep track of the profit loss idea, right? So it's someone to identify and keep track. And that's the kind of content I think, in my opinion, is going to make for really good expansive conversation after we get to the table, right? So it's like the idea behind having a table and not just going straight to the more high fidelity, high value kind of deeper content is that A, everyone wants a slide for the slide deck. B, you know, like if we genuinely, the way you get uptake on some of these things is often making it consumable. And I mean that both for like slide deck as well as for like someone can take a look and get a sense. And then if they get very incensed by something, if they get very upset by something or don't understand something, we want to make sure we have the details to back up the conversation rather than like just staying very high level. Like, well, we told you it's, you know, platform team budget. How could you not be successful, you know, kind of thing. So
yeah, in some ways in stage 3, it feels like you're gathering strength for the push to 4. It feels like actually there's like the chasm exists mostly between 2 and 3. How do you go from this sort of grassroots effort, I would argue it's somewhat like, into this thinking about and preparing for understanding this as a core piece of your business as a business?
I have some thought about between 2 and 3, just the concept of minimal variable products, right, versus units variable products. Maybe what do you think of maybe a new terminology called minimal viable platform? So because at the end of stage 2, it's a platform that's ready for use. So that's why it's a minimum viable platform. So for example, Kubernetes become a platform where you can build on. So that's the end of stage 2. And in stage 3 and beyond, you can add additional minimum viable product, you know, just new projects that can be added onto the Kubernetes ecosystem. But at least you have a platform from stage 2 onwards.
So I think I'm going to, I don't know, different words in different parts of the world. I'm going to suggest that we take that conversation offline to when we talk about the four, like the way we talk about the four levels. I would say the one thing I would say is that I think platforms are a lot like CI/CD pipelines of 10 years ago. Everyone had a delivery pipeline 10, 15, 20 years ago. It might have included Joe Schmo in the corner SCPing to a server and copying some files, but like that was their delivery pipeline. And what CI/CD codification did was they made it visible and made it faster and more repeatable and so on. Today, everyone has a platform. There is a way that people gain access to infrastructure and deliver their applications to production. Whether or not those are maintainable, manageable, customized, secure, all those things, like efficient, is where we're trying to help people with. So I personally steer away from things like minimum viable platform, because I think it throws out the baby with the bathwater a bit on like that people have a platform today, and all we're trying to do is shine a light on whether or not that platform is effective for what they're trying to achieve as a business. And so, yeah, but I do think that's a slightly tangential conversation to the aspects, and I'm realizing that I talk too much. I've known that for a long time. This is not new. And so I want to suggest that I'll leave the mic for a second to say any last kind of questions that we want to raise around the investment 4 levels before we move on to the next one.
I just wanted to confirm that I talked with a relatively well-known company yesterday, and they had 2 different kinds of platforms that they talked to me about. It was with Red Hat. We interviewed them, and the first one was very much in this stage 1, very voluntary, one-off, like do it when you can. And then they had another team, which was a more valuable part of their business, where they did have a product manager, they were advocating for it. So it really like brought this home for me. So
cool. Yeah. And that's somewhere up in here in the intro, we talk about the fact that there might be more than one platform initiative within your organization, and they should each be able to use this model independently. And then you as an organization can use it. There's no like scoping of this model to it must be organization wide, or it must be, per platform offering or whatever. So I think that's a really cool call out.
A quick question. I know that we're kind of getting into the weeds of each. I just kind of wanted to re-ask the question of like, did you think it was a higher priority for us to talk about like the just more general structure of like the 4 levels and categories? Like what I'm afraid of is we're going to kind of get through this whole list, and then the time's going to be over and we didn't actually talk about, do we want to do the concept of this, or yeah.
No, that's a fair question. So I think maybe, and given the time and stuff, maybe it's a good point to say, I've set aside the same time next week. So Tuesday at 4 p.m. UTC that I'm available, and I'll get Josh to put that on the calendar. Maybe I can now. I don't know. I'm like able to do things like this now. But I'll get it to be on the tag calendar if people would like to spend time maybe going into the weeds. But you're right. I think it's worth having the conversation open of, at this stage, there is a question all the way up at the top where it's called a maturity model, on whether or not maturity model is the right phrase, whether or not there's some other word that would capture what we're trying to achieve here, which is to give people a concrete way to evaluate their own experiences against the aspirational writings that are in the white paper. That's what we're trying to do. That's what we're trying to achieve. Maturity model is the term I'm familiar with. That doesn't mean it's the right term. And then within the maturity model, the idea that these are the aspects that we're currently targeting, and we're currently targeting a 4-level progression that are independent aspect progression. So in the sense that we will never suggest that a team or an organization is completely level 1. They might be, but that would be because they happen to be. They can very easily have a level 3 and a level 2 and a level 1 all at the same organization, all the same team, and that's okay. And they can like place themselves and decide where to place their chips on what to invest in. So those are sort of the principles of the document that are probably, to your point, worth making sure people have a chance to ask questions of or speak up about now.
So Abby, like one more question, like, do you think like for this table to have including different types of platform, like how many different types of platform available?
like use cases, Saeem?
No, I think I can share one of the article from the Octopus deploy team where they share different types of platform, shredded platform, and they have 3, 4, 5 different categories. I can share the link. So basically I'm thinking like, might you can list down what are the but that is tricky. Like he said, is currently we don't up to this point, doesn't even convince how many different platform exist and what type of platform is actually we're referring to.
I think share the document. It'd be hard to answer any questions without me reading it, because like I don't know. I think that the conversation I was having, I think it was with Victor on Slack this past week, was around the idea that this document, the idea behind this maturity model, it won't be perfect, but our goal is to make it so that what technology you choose and what technology is cool today and tomorrow doesn't affect the durability of this model. So if you want to be having a data platform versus a software application engineering platform versus this platform, it doesn't matter. The question is do you provide things as a service? The question is do you have product mindset? The question is, do you have these things? So my gut reaction is we probably wouldn't enumerate the platforms, but that is very much based on assumptions about that blog. So please do share. And I'm really happy to change my opinion on that based on what it says.
Just keeping an eye on time. Do we want to, Abby, tackle any more of these here? We could give you a couple more minutes, or
I think I'd like to leave the mic open for very specifically, does anyone feel like the aspects that are listed here are not covering something that should be, and or are like very misleading in content or context, or like basically, are there any big questions to ask about the aspects that are mentioned? And are there any big questions, big questions to ask about the concept of releasing a maturity model as a part of the platform's working group? I think if we leave those two questions now, I think if we can leave here with everyone feeling like all questions have been raised in those two categories, we're in good shape for this call. And then I'll put out the invite for next Tuesday to go into each of these in detail, hopefully with people. Come on, someone else has to have an allergic reaction to the term maturity model. I know I do. I just couldn't think of a better term.
Can you hear me?
yeah, we hear you.
Okay. So just to make sure, you want us to be aligned on the aspects first, and then agree on what level within each aspect we should describe, write about, expand it, because it's already down there in the doc, and there's a lot of conversation going on, as you mentioned, down there. Because I see now to be fair, for the past week I ignored this table and went right into the doc, into the into the
details.
paragraph. Yeah. And I see now that there's like technical team topology change from organizational structure. Do we want, like, team topology is almost a trademark word today? Do we want to be aligned with that? And then we have to, we might have to deal with other team topologies of the team topologies book. Same for user experience and documentation. I see, like, I'm not sure what the purple and black means, but do we want to go over on any of these pairs and agree on the naming now of each aspect?
I think that the reality is we don't have the time today. I think that that's what we want to try and do next Tuesday. As much as I'd love to dive into the details, I also know that Leanne's been doing some hard work on the website, and that these community calls are really good for making sure we get a kind of broad overview of what's been going on, so that we can do the deep dives where we need to. So I would hold, so what I'd say is right now, I would hold off on, proposing another word or refining, like wordsmithing each of these words for next Tuesday. And I would instead say, if you think that there's like a whole other section, like at one point, I think I was like, we had a section around engineering principles. So like, there's nothing on here that talks about how to engineer platforms. If someone feels like that, like we ended up pulling that out during like the early stages, even before we moved it into like public review here. But that's the kind of thing I mean of like, are we missing any major categories that people are feeling aren't represented? And I know that we have a few that have been talked about down below. And please add more here is maybe the call out. So just so we
Okay.
can move. Yeah.
I have to drop, so. Thank
No,
you.
please.
Thank you.
It's good.
Yeah, I think it's good. I appreciate you kind of calling out, like, I think I get a better idea of like kind of what we're looking to potentially add, or just even just scrutinize, like, okay, like what may be missing. So I think it's something good for us to think about going into the next meeting on Tuesday. As well as I think the general idea of like platform maturity model. I agree. I think Marsh put in the chat that he's a bit wary. I also feel a little bit wary of it. I think it's nice that it can kind of match what has already been built by the cloud native team and the other model. I think because of sort of what you called out with like, you may be on one component, but 4 or 3 on a different. I think there's just maybe a different word to be able to use that just kind of like outlines like, because I think generally what this does, I think is it gives you a good picture of like, where might I be at in different areas of our platform engineering like progression. So I think having some way, it's almost kind of like an identifier, or I don't know. So I think it's something that I can keep thinking about. I think that we can keep thinking about going into the next meeting on Tuesday. But yeah, I don't have a alternative suggestion as of right now.
Yeah, cool. And definitely that concept has been codified in the intro. That idea that you're not level 1. You are not then deemed level 1 with a sword on each shoulder and whatever it is that you will be using this to identify where you are. So yeah. All right, then I'll stop sharing for now, but please know this is all open conversations. And as was mentioned, this is something we've been having a lot of chats on in the comments. So please do jump in there, and I'll keep trying to start asynchronous conversations in Slack. And also this time next week, we'll be here doing a deep dive into those words. So.
Sure, because one thing about the platform is constant change, right? Compared with the previous generation of closed source platform. Which I don't know, I haven't looked through all the details. Which part of this table talk about constant, looking out for the field, anything new, right? For example, the Dropbox, when they come up, they just build on top of AWS 3. So the fact that the platform team know there's a new thing called AWS 3 is critical for them to build a new platform based on S3. So which box talk about this constant lookup for new technology?
I will add that as a question mark. I think that it's all about progression and all about constantly being better. That's what product mindset is, but I will make sure that that gets raised as like possibly being something we can more clearly articulate and make sure people aren't needing to read between the lines about. So yeah, good point.
All right, so Leanne, are you up to kind of tell us how work is going with the website and your proposal, or where things are at and how we could help?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, my neighbor just decided to hammer now. So if it gets too loud, just let me know and I'll close the window, although it's really hot in here. Yeah, thanks. So I think I'm also going to go to probably every working group and just see if I can present this idea really quickly of restructuring our website. So I hope you can all see my screen. This is how our website looks right now. Oh, wait. No, wait, that's not our website. CNCF,
Although including
tag app delivery.
has come up, so I was interested that you brought that one first.
Yeah, it's tagappdelivery.cncf.io. So this is our website right now. This is pretty much taken from the repository. Our white papers are here, and then there's a blog. And the original idea that we had was that we want to restructure the website in a way that will better surface what we're working on and how people can contribute. Those were the two most important things that we were thinking of. And the way that we started working on it now was that we have this doc. So if you go to the repository, by the way, this is issue 410 and everything is linked in this issue as well. But yeah, so there's this document and we are just discussing that kind of general structure. What do we think should be grouped together? You know, like where does stuff fit in? And now I also started working on a prototype, whatever, because like this is a nice way to just, you know, free from any kind of framework or structure, just discuss like what do we think makes sense. But then of course we also have to see what can we even do, like sidebar navigation, all of that. I mean, it's been a while since I was a front-end developer, so I would like to keep us kind of in the confines of what is already set up. But basically the idea would be we have, again, kind of like a landing page here with general information. Then we have something like contribute. So this is all our projects that we're looking for active contributions that are scoped to the actual project. So the maturity matrix could be something, for example, or Potato Head. We're always looking for users for that. So it should be easy for the visitors to just see. And then we have a separate section for the working groups, because they're probably going to need a little bit more context. So I just started with the platforms working group for now, because people that have commented in the doc were mostly from the platforms working group. And yeah, so there's like it's just a couple of stuff that I just copy pasted here just to see like, how does it look? How does it work? And yeah, our charter is here as well. So yeah, as I said, I will go to all the working groups, of which there are 3, if I'm not mistaken, right? There's GitOps and there's artifacts. Okay. And just let them know to please also add, you know, what they think, what their structure should look like to the stock, or even to the pull request themselves if they want to. If you all want to contribute, same thing. Either go to the stock and have like a more high-level discussion about the actual like high-level structure, or go look at this pull request, which is also linked in the issue here. It's PR 416. And feel free to, you know, contribute, commit stuff. I actually don't know how we can all work on the same pull request, because you might have to go to my fork. I'm not quite sure how this works. So I haven't done that particular thing yet, but we'll see. Just let me know. I can give you access to this repository and we can all work together asynchronously. Colin, are you here? I saw you were here earlier. Okay, because Colin suggested to do like a sync session where we just like meet for a call for 1 or 2 hours. Personally, I would rather do async, but if you want to do that, just so we also probably also for knowledge transfer would be pretty useful. We can do that as well. But really, so far, right now, I am just playing around with Hugo and the website as such, and see like what are the kind of things we need to do to make things look good. Yeah, that's pretty much the entire run through. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Yeah, it's not as sexy as the maturity matrix. I agree.
Putting thought into it, I'm so glad that somebody is putting deliberate thought into this, and this is already an improvement from, you know, just, you know, the MVP that we started with. Yeah, I appreciate that. I think I agree also that it's really just because also when we discussed the website in the general meeting of the tag, then we were discussing, you know, maybe we should like look at the charter again. So really that has helped kind of kick off a lot of
general thoughts about how we want to do things, and what's important to us as the tag to showcase to the outside. So any of these things, anything that comes to mind right now to you, please put it in platforms VG or in tag app delivery in the Slack. Put it in the issue, wherever. Just surface your ideas, and yeah, let's make the website better, I guess. That's pretty much it. There's not that much. Yeah, I'm posting links also.
I want to introduce you to Chris Abraham, who's the CNCF developer, I guess, that put the site together for us and for others. So making a note to introduce you.
Oh, that would be awesome. Thank you.
You made a joke. You made a joke. It's not as cool as a maturity model. I think this is way more impactful than any one project. Like, so this is the reason I posted into the, just to say, the reason I posted into the original item on GitHub, issue on GitHub, is because this was actually the first thing that Taylor, who does the CNCF ecosystem, said, is that the reason that there's a belief that the platform maturity model, the platform white paper had such a strong reaction and uptake in the group, not only because it was like a hard work piece of documentation, but that it was made accessible to people through a website and through that kind of visibility. So and he was highly suggestive that we should pull more people in from that website. So his first suggestion around the maturity model was to get it up on the website for review as soon as possible, even if it was stated as like under review or whatever. So yeah, definitely. I don't play down how important this piece of work is, because I think it's.
Oh, I was just saying it's not as sexy. I'm not saying it's not as important or as cool, but I think you know what? Now that you said that, maybe what would be actually great is if I just, like, for now, just move everything that we already have on our website right now and put it on the new website, and we can just like release that and then iterate on it, right? There's no reason why we have to like discuss and do the entire thing and then have like a major release in like 6 months or so. So maybe like that could be something that I can focus on for now, to just make sure that everything that's on our website right now is in the new structure. We go with the new structure, and then we can, in parallel, still discuss other things that need to go on the website, and for other teams to join us.
I'd be a big fan of that approach.
Yeah,
is just like do the restructure, basically do the refactor. We talk sometimes in coding of like make the change easy, then make the easy change. I think doing the refactor would enable more people to engage. Like you were just saying, I don't know how people can engage on my fork and As soon as we get the refactor of the new structure in place, all of a sudden people can make suggestions on each page, like a lot easier independently. So yeah, absolutely. That's a really great call out.
So if we still have a little bit of time, Michael Luskin on the call here. Michael has been working on a couple projects for the group, and Michael, I was wondering if you want to share either one of those, if you're open to talking about them now.
Sure. I was thinking of sharing it maybe after, just given the time, and I'll run through kind of context and where we're at and how people can participate, and then I'll share everything after the fact. Okay, so I've been working with Oliver. Where's Oliver? Why can't I see you on my screen? He's there somewhere. Maybe other people can see him. Coming out of the platform, the original platform paper, product mindsets was mentioned, but on its own, I think it's easy to agree, it's a pretty fluffy concept. Like, what actually does product thinking mean in practice? How do you operationalize it in an organization? What does that look like? And how does that actually lead to any meaningful outcomes that a business cares about? That's the focus of our paper. And it's very much complementary to Abby's maturity models and to the original platform paper. It turned out organically that all of these things are like very tightly coupled together and are self-referential and refer each other. So we wrote a draft of it, which we'll share after the call. I think it's at the place now where it would very much benefit from other people taking a look at it. And we also launched a survey to recruit builders of the platform and consumers of the platform that we can actually interview. A big part of this paper is to get real insights from practitioners, like what is actually happening in the organization. So we use the survey to recruit those folks, and Josh, we very much need a boost in getting that out more widely, so we can get more participants. We're in the process now of just going through the first kind of setting up the first couple of builder interviews to flesh out the script, and then we're going to bring that back to the community as well to get feedback, to iterate it, so we can go wider with it. At the scale we want to do it, we're definitely going to need a lot of help in like pairing up and running interviews asynchronously and then coming back together. The biggest thing for those interviews is the structure, right? We want to tease out like pattern and signals from these interviews of what's going on, and that requires consistent structure to like how we're going to run the interviews. So that's another thing we'll share out once it's ready to get feedback on after the paper itself. And beyond the builders and consumers, right? We're also going to be talking to.
Sorry, Michael, just to clarify, you're going to share out the paper and you're going to share out the interview framework for people
the paper first to start getting feedback on that. Then once we go through just the first kind of interview to shake out, like to get some experience hands-on with what works, what doesn't, and bring that interview script back in to get feedback on that and refine it. And once we start getting into the builder consumer interviews, we're also going to do PM and leaders interviews, right? Because part of the product thinking paper isn't just how does this play out on your platform team if your organization is mature enough to have a product manager and that level of strategic focus. But we want to know, how did leaders shape and create the space for the platform to be taken as like a serious strategic investment in the business? We want that whole story. And so the only way we get that is talking to enough folks and bringing it into the paper. So something we can share with the wider community about, into Abby's maturity model, right? That's a huge part of all of this work is, what's the blueprint? Like, what's the reality of your organization? Where are you actually at? And what can you do about it to get to a better place, right? That's like a fundamental thing. So we're going to go out into the world and see what that looks like across different sizes of companies and different regions. Yeah, I think I kind of meandered back to the original thing. So how is everybody with that? Any immediate questions around like the scope and focus of it and where we are with it? Very much. Yeah.
Sorry, Michael, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. I would be curious, like I think I'm aware that there's been basically the beginnings of a paper have been written. But the way it's being presented is that like the paper will be the output of these sort of interviews that we're trying to curate and identify. So I guess one question I have is like, where is the, like, what is the intention of the relationship between the paper that you were going to share with us and the like outcomes of the interviews that you want to try and do?
Yeah, very, very good question. So the paper is, if you think of it as Oliver and I got together and drafted out our thinking around what is product mindset and how does it play out in the organization and how do you operationalize as a baseline. The idea is then to go into the real world and talk to people and bring those structured insights back. And then it's still an open question. What is the relationship in terms of how it plays out? Is it going to be, the interviews are going to kind of shape the sections, or they're going to be examples throughout the kind of structure we currently have? Still very much an open question. The most important thing is that the end result is something that, a person can consume. And once again, usually, in some semblance of a leadership role where they can take this and it gives them a better understanding with concrete examples to reinforce what works and how you get there. And also the anti-patterns, right? When we talk to people, we're going to get as many, if not more, examples of things going horribly wrong. And that's invaluable to us too, right? We want to bring the anti-patterns into the paper and show that people are on the wrong path or misunderstanding product thinking or not even thinking in terms of a product. So yeah, long-winded way to say, we'll see. The way that those examples should reinforce the things. And maybe some of the points we're even making are going to change based on the very clear signal we're getting from from the community.
And so the idea is the paper will not get released. You're not intending for a version of the paper to be released prior to running the interviews. Is that just for like kind
No.
of prior like timelines of things, I guess?
Yeah, I don't think it's that valuable on its own. Like it's interesting. Yeah, we'll define, we define product thinking, how to operationalize it, what that looks like, throughout the let's say the maturity of the platform in your organization. But I think without the real world insights, it's just for this specific paper, I don't think it's as impactful.
I wonder if there's a valuable, like you could do a blog post for it though.
Like ahead
in
of
the
time,
sense-
so like
yeah,
give people,
so like to try and tease people in. So
I
some
like
of the
that.
stuff you have written that's a bit more confident,
good,
and
yeah.
whatever, like blog post about that. And I think one of the things that I see as a huge value of what you're working on is that while the maturity model will have a snapshot for a slide and it will have more details, it will never be able to go into the depth of details that each of those sections deserve. And so I could see this being a prototype of how to provide a deep dive on any one of these aspects and how to get there. And so the blog post could kind of potentially tie into the maturity, like point to the maturity model and say, and what we're looking for is the use cases. So come talk to us and we can walk through the maturity model with you, have conversations about it, whatever. And like, maybe we can try and drive up the number of participants through that. I don't know if it's helpful, basically.
Yeah, no, it is. I think a blog post that ties in the original platform paper, the maturity model paper, and the scope and intent of this would be like a very nice, concise way to like give people some structure. Like the platform paper started as kind of like one thing with an undefined future, and now we're giving shape to how these things connect and like the value this brings to the community. So I think a blog post that talks about that would be probably very helpful.
Just for
Oliver.
clarity.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, just for clarity, I think I had a misconception in my head of that the surveys were informing the principles that you would talk about in terms of the mindset, but it seems like kind of the opposite, that you've got like general principles sort of already like articulated. And that's where we're kind of talking about this blog post where you can like articulate some of those principles in terms of the mindset, but the survey can help, I guess, like maybe shape some of those principles, but more so like more reinforce like real world examples of how those principles come to life. Is that right?
Yeah, so the survey, without belaboring it, was kind of like we wanted to go out into the world and recruit people. And Josh and a few folks already wanted to do a survey on the back of the paper. We kind of melded the two. The value for us from the survey is really like a snapshot of maturity, just enough information without like overloading it as a proxy for like what might be like what experience this person who we're going to talk to has in the kind of organization they come from. So, that way we can bucket participants around, let's think of it as a maturity model, right? People who come from like very sophisticated organizations who have product, tied to business value. The product is a strategic initiative. It drives the business. It lets the business nimbly respond to the market and everybody gets it and they invest in it. To like the one-off, there's some documentation somewhere, but talk to this guy to like get help with anything, or a front-end developer has to like go deeper into delivery just to get stuff out the door. So the whole spectrum, that way we can have like when we present this out, the idea is to paint a picture of like what things look like at different stages in more tangible terms, and what you need, what kind of thinking, like that's the biggest part of this, is like what kind of thinking do you need, and how do you actually make, operationalize that thinking to get to the next stage, right? To get to certain outcomes in the business. So it's beyond just like the platform as like this technical tool focused on technical people to make life easier for other technical people. This is a incredibly powerful thing that is the core of your business nowadays. How well do you understand that? Do you understand it? How do you operationalize that? So that the survey was that, and we're obviously going to be reaching out to people in more senior leadership positions outside of the survey because they don't reply to surveys, and then PMs who weren't part of the survey. That'll just leave as an open call. I'm going to pull in people I know. If anybody has product people that are working on platforms now, we're gonna want to talk to those folks. But all of that, I'll message out in like a much more structured way of like where things are and a take on how folks can help, which is obviously open to any kind of feedback, just so we can coordinate a little better and continue recruiting folks, interview folks, and then get people from the community who want to participate to pair off and run the interviews themselves. There's no way we can do all of them or want to.
Yes, Michael. Can you hear me, Michael?
Yeah.
So basically, I think really like the idea. That's really, really reasonable and really important to the work we actually were doing here. So what my recommendation would be, so actually what we can do is like, I see some of the other community member regarding these group. What they do is they have a weekly newsletter where they pull in the article and information related to the subject. They actually quantify, I'm actually looking for the reasonable answer from the community. And at the end of the newsletter, they ask question around some particular subject, and then the people can generate opinion on top of it. So maybe so like survey to help people to fill in the survey is a very tricky. I don't even spend time for the surveys, but I think having a blog post or some newsletter thing can give us a visibility. So I'm working with the Cloud Native Weekly newsletter as well. So I'm discussing with Josh in the past, like, why not we can create a blog post and the meeting minute discussion, and we'll be available on the website that in this minute we'll discuss these 4 or 5 things. So I include those into the newsletter of the Cloud Native Weekly, and that's a huge members. Around about, I think there's a very good member in there. So meaning we're actually talking to people on the right time where we want their input to be included in there. So that's, I think we can do work together as well. So I think that would be an easier approach. We can have some conversation, will be in the public, and then people can start commenting on that, either on the GitHub discussion or on the Slack discussion, on any physical way we can do it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let's sync up on what that might look like, and at what stage should that come into the work. Yeah, that's good. Oliver, did I miss anything worth mentioning?
No, I think the only other thing would be just making sure we have consistent language with Abby's paper. So I probably just need to do another pass of Abby's paper and just clean up what we've put there and make sure it aligns.
And I would just say making sure that your experiences and knowledges get fed into the maturity model. So yes, I agree 100% on the alignment, but please don't consider that a one-way task. Because I think that there's definitely like some movement happening on the maturity model for good reason, and I want to make sure that y'all bring that into it. So yeah.
And I'll just throw in that sometimes takes a little while before you start getting that critical mass of comments and feedback. So don't be discouraged if it takes a few days or even a couple weeks. It's a pretty long paper too, so
yeah, no, that's perfectly fine. We got plenty of time.
Quick question on the survey. You guys might have covered it. Sorry for having to step out.
Yeah.
On the survey itself, is there any way to strengthen the language that around the privacy portion and how the information is going to be shared? I think right now it's still a little iffy as far as like, will my information get out there, which may prevent some people from sharing. That was just an opinion.
Yeah, good call. If do you have some thinking around what that could look like? I think Josh, remind me, when we talked about it, we ran it by a lawyer here to just get immediate feedback. But yeah, pretty much any stronger, more emphatic way that we can say that literally right now only 2 people are going to review this, and when it is shared out, it's going to be entirely anonymized, and then it will not live beyond publishing this information. Everything will be deleted. So anything that gets like incredibly emphatic about the sequence of things and who has access would be amazing.
Would it be useful, Michael, to put up the survey as a doc also, that if people want to comment and make changes or?
So we have access to the survey. Survey as a doc is always fun. They don't make it easy to like share it for iteration with a larger group.
Oh, yeah, no,
you
not
can't-
the form itself. Yeah, I more meant just a Google Doc.
Oh yeah. Then I'll just share the.
Write out the
thing.
questions and the answers, and people can, then we can iterate on it. So
Okay.
now you have 3 things to publish, Michael and
Well,
Oliver.
so I mean, specifically, to Colin's point, bolstering that language would be helpful. But right now, I think the survey itself is in a good enough place. We just need more visibility on it.
Okay.
It gives us everything we need for its intended purpose, which is to recruit people.
Okay, good. So
and that- yeah.
right now you're happy with where that's at?
Yeah. I don't think we need to we can iterate on it in the long term when we come back and rerun this as a snapshot of future recruiting of where their maturity is as a company. But right now, for what we need,
Okay.
we have so many other things to do. I just wanted I want a wider audience for it. I want more people to opt in and say, yes, please, I'm happy to talk to you for 40 minutes. I
Should
want those
we,
people.
okay, that's cool. Yeah, thank you for clarifying. And just one of the things I kind of heard from Saeem, should we recruit people to talk to us, interview, even if they don't want to do the survey? Is there a way? Just to say, here's my
Yes.
email, call me?
Yes, absolutely. I think that can be done. Absolutely. But I think what I do today, before meeting with this group today, I actually hosted a Twitter space to generate some awareness. And I've also posted some tweets. So that call is actually happening. So a few of the folks member will be actually trying to do the same thing. Whenever we have a meeting, we can actually post in the LinkedIn and Twitter handle as well. What we can do, connect with the CNCF team that has running the Cloud Native weekly newsletter. They have some infos like how to communicate with the folks, what email do we use? Even we can use I think the KCD's events that happening in every week or every month. We can actually pitch in our talks this is a CNCF working group. And if I think one is happening in KCD, Texas. And I think one of the team member from this working group, his name is Ali Ibrahim, who's actually hosting this event. So I've communicated with him to post these things in your KCD event as well. But there are small things.
Yeah, that'd be great. Even
yes,
if
absolutely.
we,
I think that.
No, so go ahead.
Yes, I'm just saying we can generate with small events, can create even tussle up to the good audience that actually we're looking for. But I think whenever I do a podcast on my YouTube channel, I try to invite people on this working group. I have discussed with Alexis Richardson. He joined today, but he's actually had a conflicted call, and he mentioned I will be in the next call. So I think KCD's even commenting on some people's posting hey, you are actually, if you have the same opinions, please join this working group, or some do regular posting. I think for Josh, I think the blog post or the meeting minutes, we can actually take a script out of the YouTube and push to post it on the website. And then I include this into the Cloud Native weekly newsletter. I think this might lift up some people to be participated in here.
Right. I think maybe based on everything that you said, the next kind of, belaboring it, the next quickest thing that we could do to get wider dissemination is a blurb on why, which we already have, on why we're doing what we're doing, with the link to the survey that can go into these groups that are running physically or virtually or anywhere, right? And we'll see what the uptick is from that, as a next immediate, very quick thing we can do.
Yes, absolutely. I'm absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. I'm absolutely happy. I think what we can do is
I'll message you.
I can work. Can you hear me?
Yeah. I was just saying I'll message you after the call so we can coordinate.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's since we're 10 minutes
great.
over, we probably gotta
Yeah.
wrap up here.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's it. So we've got the core crew at the very end. Good to see you all.
Thanks,
Till next
everyone.
time. See you online. Have a good day.
Thanks.
Thanks all. Bye.
Thank you. Have
Bye.
a wonderful day. Bye-bye.